Hey everybody, just want to share a quick little insight from our City General Conference this morning. I was listening to the October 1933 General Conference, and Joseph Fielding Smith was talking about the duty of prophets. And he talked about how there were some members who wanted to stop up the prophet and tell him, hey, you're not supposed to talk about those things. You should only talk about a specific group of things. And he's like, that's not how it works. The prophet is duty bound to warn on any issue or any topic he feels inspired to do so. That his purview and his prerogative is every topic under the sun. And then he goes on to talk about that not only is it his ability to talk about anything, it's his duty to raise a voice of warning. And that if he does not, he will stand condemned before the Lord, and the sins of the people that he could have prevented had he raised his voice of warning will be answered upon his head. Now, this is very important because this is one of the most misunderstood doctrines in the church. We will spout off the second article of faith. Man will be punished for their own sins and not for Adam's transgressions. And we think that means the only person you are ever accountable is for yourself. That's not true. The second article of faith is a denunciation of the idea of original sin, or that the children could be guilty for the sins of their parents. That is a false doctrine. It's trash. The second article of faith is throwing that away. It is not saying man will only be accountable for his sins and not the transgressions of others. That is not what the second article of faith is saying. It is only about original sin. In fact, Joseph Fielding Smith goes on to detail the importance of the opposite. The fact that we are accountable for the sins of others if we have stewardship over them and we do not raise a voice of warning. This is why Jacob talks about in the Book of Mormon that he had to share and denounce sin so that way he could rid his garments of the blood of that generation. Anyone who's been through the temple should be like, wait a minute, that sounds kind of familiar to what I've made covenants to do. We are under covenant obligation, temple covenants, that we will raise the voice of warning. And if we don't, the consequence of that is that the blood and the sins of this generation will be answered on our head. So if you think you can just be like, oh, well, I don't need to really share the gospel, proclaim the truth, or do the things that Jesus said. I can just love and be kind and just that. Never do anything else. Yeah, you can. And then you will answer for the sins of the people that you could have saved had you been willing to raise your voice of warning and help them come into Christ. And that is something we don't want. And Joseph Fielding Smith ends his talk with that warning that if we do not do our duty, if we do not follow the prophet, if we do not share the gospel, then we will, at the judgment bar, face an awful consequence as people point their fingers at us and say, they were the ones whose actions led me away. And their sins will be answered upon our heads.